All right, we're on. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 23rd meeting of the Concord Finance Committee. I am Tom Tarpey. I am the current chair for at least another 15 minutes. And I want to remind you all that we are being recorded and broadcast. I also want to give you a note about these microphones. They are very sensitive when you are very close to them, but they're not so good if you're sort of more than 3 inches away. It's good. People are going to have to strain to hear you. So for my good and the good of the listening audience, please give it the rock star treatment and put your face right up to it. All right. We're going to open with approving the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. The first set being from the last regular meeting we had before town meeting on March 14th. And I'd like to know if anyone has any questions, comments, or amendments to this set of minutes.
I haven't had time to read them.
I haven't either.
I've read them, but since we don't have Anita here, maybe we should hold off on approving these until...
That would be fine. All right, so that...
So Tom, did you receive Anita's final copy of the minutes? Has she had a chance to go through these again after my comments?
Oh, you sent comments this week?
Well, so I sent comments, so because I was away, there were 2 sets of minutes that were outstanding. So I sent them to Anita on Monday. But knowing that she wasn't going to be here tonight, giving her the option of having them prepared for tonight or not. And I don't know which option she selected.
So,
Did you make corrections that have been made?
I haven't looked at it. I didn't hear anything back from her.
so John, because we are going to postpone the approval of these minutes until the next regular meeting, I think that question can wait until.
Although, John, you can
The
tell
short
by
answer to your question is I
minutes
don't
we
know.
have.
I haven't gone through them. So,
Tom, I just want to point out, the minutes we have both say draft 325 and draft 423. So these are not, don't have John's. They do not have John's comments. Because it says at the top, draft 3.25 for the March 14 minutes, and draft 4.23 for the April 8th minutes.
okay,
So they don't have your comments in it.
Right.
good. All right, so you may put aside both sets of these draft minutes, and we will not take them up at this meeting, but rather we'll take them up at the next meeting. Mr. Taylor, welcome. Peter. Okay, and there you go. All right, next on the agenda is the results of the nominating committee. The nominating committee met this evening, and I will ask the nominating committee clerk to read the slate that we nominated. Mr. Clerk.
That's you.
Me? Oh, but I didn't get nominated. Nobody voted on
Oh, okay. So, clerk of the nominating committee. I
it.
can-
Right.
So,
Okay, so, do you want me to read it?
yes.
Okay. So for chair, we nominated the esteemed Dean
You need to speak right into that microphone.
Banfield for chair. For vice chair and guidelines chair, we nominated Mary Hardman. And for the clerk for next year, Christine Reynolds. And for guidelines clerk, John Hickling.
So you said for clerk next year, but actually the very next clerk, starting this evening, it will be Christine Reynolds, assuming we vote this slate.
Right.
Okay.
You want to-
So any questions, comments, or other nominations from the committee members? Hearing none, are you ready for a vote? All right. So first we'll, I'll accept a motion to accept the nominations as proposed.
Second?
Thank you. And if there's no discussion, we're ready for a vote on that. All those in favor of these nominations?
technically, John shouldn't be doing the motion, since he's a nominee. So, if you would,
Thank
Dee
you,
will
Dee.
move and I will second.
Okay. And Christine probably shouldn't have seconded because she's a nominee
No,
also.
Dee is seconded. So Dee moved and I seconded.
Good, thank you. All those in favor? All right, I think it's unanimous. And now, we are going to vote for this slate. All those in favor of this slate of officers, please signify by raising your hand.
Can we vote?
You may vote. Yes. Okay. It is unanimous. All right, well, congratulations, Mr. Banfield.
Thank you, sir.
Now, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Were you, because there's been some discussion among the nominating committee about what the protocol is. My understanding was that the gavel was going to pass to you during the meeting tonight.
That was my understanding.
Okay, well, that being the case, and if you're so prepared.
Having been voted, I am now prepared to.
Okay, all right. Well, then I metaphorically pass the gavel to Mr. Banfield.
I should have brought my gavel. I made a gavel when 8th grade contained chalk. And I've never had any use for it, so I may bring it at my next meeting.
Okay, all right. Well, just I want to tell everybody how much of a pleasure it has been being the chair of this committee. You've been curious, active, thoughtful, and enjoyable people to work with. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to having as enjoyable a year under Mr. Banfield's.
And we have appreciated your guidance and wisdom. So thank you, Mr. Charles. Okay. Our next item on the agenda is a town meeting recap with the moderator, but that doesn't seem as though the moderator is in attendance. So we're gonna have to move on. I don't know how to make that happen without the moderator being here. So.
I don't know whether the moderator is in the select board room. I could go check.
Oh, we can check.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can, yeah, go ahead. If you want to check, that's fine. So while Mr. Tarpey, while Tom is out checking on the possibility that Carmen Reese is in another room, I'd like you all to just at least review in the packet the roster and make sure that your information is accurate. And if you need to make any updates, you can hand those in to me, and we'll make sure that those get circulated. And what's the schedule?
No, we have no moderator.
Well, we will push that off for another meeting. It's fine. Okay, so if you have any updates to your roster listing, please, you can forward those to me. My email address there, dbanfield, fincom@gmail is what I use for this meeting. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is to just go over our annual meeting schedule. For those of you who are new, Greg and Wade, welcome, and Parshar and Dee. Typically, our meetings are regularly held on a monthly basis. We meet monthly as a FinCom, but the schedule is quite rigorous as we get into the fall. The Guidelines Subcommittee, which is the superset of the FinCom, we are all members of that subcommittee, meets almost weekly between October and November, and then we have a meeting or two in December where we cogitate on the warrant articles and look over what's going on for the warrant. So it becomes very intense, and I want everybody to be aware, if you have any concerns about being unable to attend what amounts to nearly weekly meetings during that fall period, please raise your hand, because one of the problems that I think we've had is that we don't really seem to be able to get a majority of the members. We are able to get a quorum, but I'd like to see, with a 15-member committee, I'd like to see us try to be here. That's something that if we were to go back over the minutes, the number of people on the absentee list at every meeting is significant, and I'd like to see if we can do better this year. That's one of my things that I'd like to see. One of the things that I'd like to hear from the committee on is, I believe in the past we have taken votes regarding remote participation. So one of the possible outlets that we have, if you can't make it, would be the possibility, and the town allows for remote participation. I think that we were allowed to have one, possibly two. Does anyone know the rule on remote participation in its formality? I think it might be 2 people can participate. I'm not sure. With a committee this large, that would be helpful, but it may only be 1. However, each committee who would like to use remote participation needs to take a vote to approve that their committee will use it and is capable of it. And we need to also be in a position to support it with a conference phone or whatever, or whether that's Skype or overheads are being used. There has to be some way in which the materials can be available to remote participants, as well as have their voice be heard and have them be able to hear everything in the meeting. So, I'd love to see a better attendance record under my administration. So if you really feel like it's just too much and you can't do it, I want to hear from you. And if you need to back away from the table, it's just too much of a load. I'd rather have people who are able to be here. But I'd like to also entertain a discussion of remote participation, because I don't think that at the moment our committee is in a state of being approved for remote participation. Would anyone like to talk about that?
Dean, I'd like to move that we approve remote participation, whether it's 1 or 2 members or whatever. And I'll just say, in support of that, it gives us flexibility and allows people who might be out of town for 1 or 2 meetings to participate. So it sounds like a good way to keep everybody involved.
I'd like to second that. As someone that missed an inordinate amount of meetings last season, I'm a victim of that. So for me I travel quite a bit now, so for me to have the ability to dial in would be tremendous help.
You're remote.
Dial it in. Dial it in.
So under discussion, how,
Well, it's been seconded, so we're into discussion.
okay, so,
Dee, could you pull the microphone closer to you?
all right. I'm just curious in terms of how, if someone is unable to attend a meeting, what is the benefit of being able to view it? It'll be televised, the meeting will be televised. That doesn't constitute participation, but at least a person would be able to hear what was said at the meeting.
I have some comments on that, but
Okay.
it is a way. I don't know what the tape delay would be in the event that you're watching it in broadcast mode. So if we were to have, say, a conference phone allowing someone to actually participate, I don't know how well the video presentation would sync with their ability to actually participate in real time.
Okay, because that goes kind of to the next question. If in their participation, could they participate texting, I'm using my hands to demonstrate, just in texting questions in for the meeting? I think the other thing is, if you can't be at a meeting, and I know that I will not be able to be at least one of those meetings, that I can view it when I get home on TV and know what was said and read the minutes and things. So I just don't know, how, yes, I wouldn't be here, and yes, I could not qualify as being one of the members who, seek a quorum. I just am trying to better understand how we can use email, how we can use viewing it on TV as keeping up to speed.
I'll let Tom speak, but I do have some comments about that, and so, Tom,
So,
what are your...
I'm just seeking a clarification. I thought that when we started this and with Phil's motion, that we were talking about people phoning in, having a speakerphone and participating
Real-time.
Real-time, yes,
orally.
yes.
Real-time.
And only, that was the only, that was what was in my mind. So,
There's obviously an opportunity to possibly augment, just audio with maybe some capacity to see PowerPoints or otherwise make a richer participation, whether that's with WebEx or some other technology. There are definitely ways to get beyond just an audio participant. But for the sake of the conversation, I do think that we have to think of the kind of what we'll call the lowest common denominator, which would just be an audio participant who is dialed into what amounts to a conference phone. But let me make comments about what you were saying, Dee. If we all have busy lives, and I am fully aware that people will miss meetings, but it would really be very helpful if you could find the few hours in your week to go back over the tape. Our meetings are going to be recorded and archived by our CCTV folks, so it would be really helpful. I'll give you a little experience of mine, and that was I was on the NRC for 5 years. That's very legal. When you're talking about reviewing someone's property application for how they're going to manipulate their wetlands or regulated areas within their property lines, you need to hear all of the testimony. You need to, and if it takes 3 or 4 meetings to finalize somebody's filing, you need to know exactly what was said and be able to rule on it. And in order to participate, you have to sign paperwork that says, I have listened to the entire meeting so that I can participate in this filing that has been continued. We're not that rigorous, but I would really appreciate it if anyone who does have to miss a meeting does go back over the material. And I have some feedback on that I received indirectly through the moderator, and that is that during our multiple iterations of the guidelines process, some of the participants who come in to give presentations, they'll give a presentation and then they'll come back, we'll provide comments, we'll ask further questions, and they'll come back a second time. Now, when they meet with us and they meet with a separate and different population of members, they may end up fielding the same questions again when they feel like they already answered that question at a prior meeting because that person wasn't there and they didn't hear it, but they could have heard it if they watched the tape. So I'm just going to suggest that if you do miss a meeting, if you could watch the tape, you'll at least be up to speed on what was done. So that's my comment on that, on how that can be used, Dee, and I think it could be very valuable. It's not as rigorous as the process we had to do with the NRC. It's not a legal thing, but it would be very helpful. So,
I just wanted to make a couple of comments.
yeah.
Well, this may be a helpful convenience. I hope that it's not going to be relied on to make a quorum. And
Okay.
I think what its real useful purpose is that if somebody who can't make the meeting but has a expertise or has been following a particular issue and has gone to all the school committee meetings and so on, but can't make that one critical meeting, it allows us to have the benefit of that person's input. And I think that's really where it comes in. I know of several times where we've been dealing with something and the person who really knew all about it wasn't able to make the meeting and would have helped.
Great.
So being a new member, I got the committee handbook. Okay. I did remember seeing a section on remote.
Greg, you ought to drag a microphone with you.
Yeah. seeing a section on the remote participation policy. To address the quorum, a quorum has to be physically at the meeting.
Good.
And it says remote participation should be limited to one member per scheduled meeting.
Okay, so one member.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is it gives a list of reasons for the remote participation. Being illness or disability, family or other personal emergency, military service, or significant geographic distance.
So you're traveling on business.
Right. You're Brian. My kids, I have 2 kids, right? So, well, the wife's out, I'm going to participate from my home. That
Probably
Yeah,
doesn't quite.
So there are definite areas of when we can use this policy according to what's in the committee.
Great.
Fair enough, thank you. Okay, so we're on a motion right now. Is there any more comment on the motion?
I wonder if we should amend the motion to specify real-time participation and restrict it to the criteria that Greg has listed in that committee book.
I think that's the rules of engagement as it is. I don't know that we
So
have
we
to
don't
do
have to-
anything
I thought that was
further.
when I said approve, it's just that, yeah.
Okay.
It's almost, I think it might be a state law, actually.
It is per Massachusetts,
Yeah.
but it's the town.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
So are we ready for a vote? Okay. All those in favor of remote participation? Opposed? It's unanimous, no abstentions. Okay, we're ready to vote. Okay, so we will allow it. We will have to come up with, and I will try to work through a policy whereby you can identify in advance that I'm going to need this, because we'll probably have to set something up with someone to make sure we have a conference phone available and we have an open line, et cetera. So that's all. So we'll come up with a policy for that. So the meeting schedule is here. It's
Just want to make a point about this meeting schedule. The meeting schedule after the summer that we have is not this year's schedule. So if you start
Right,
putting
okay.
those dates in, you'll find they're
yeah.
on the wrong day of the week. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's a.
Generally, it's
but you can,
that's
you can
dense,
get
and
a
that's
feel
the-
for it. October 4th, 11th, 18th, 25th,
Yeah.
all of October, we're meeting every week.
Yeah.
November 8th, 15th, 29th, we're meeting frequently. This was challenging. Actually, I think there was one other meeting we squeezed in November because the school committee
Right.
had some reason to push out. And so we ended up with a meeting between the 15th and the 29th. We had another meeting, I believe. So it's a very busy fall calendar that we are up against generally.
So we will stick to the Thursday schedule?
Thursdays
Put these
are,
on
those
our
are our
calendars?
days, those are our days, our Thursdays, they're always on Thursdays, yeah. Okay, so that is our FinCom calendar. Okay, so,
So when's the official one come out?
I'll work with Carrie to just work through the calendar and get the days.
Currently, the select board has to decide when the town meeting is going to
Exactly,
be.
yes.
Yeah, then we
And then it
kind of
backs
back
up.
into some of that.
It backs
Okay.
up.
It has to do with when's, they have their whole calendar of when's the warrant got to be closed and what, and so we sort of feed into that and set up our hearing schedules, et cetera, have to fall into those.
So it doesn't really affect the guidelines.
It's unlikely to affect the guidelines. We did have some negotiation last year, Dee, with the school committee. They have their process for approving their budget has to dovetail with our guidelines process. So there was some back and forth that we entered into with them so that they could get in front of us and then approve their budget in a timely manner. So they have to hold a hearing on their budget, and so they have their own process. So there's a little bit of give and take that needs to go on. So we aren't quite solid on exactly what the days will be in November, I think. One of the, just to be, especially for the new members, one of the issues that the guidelines process creates is a lot of forward-looking, especially for the school committee. The calendars for both the town and the schools are, I think, June 1st, or is it June 30th? It's one or the other, but as a result, they're not even in the mode in the schools of spending their money really until the beginning of September, and we're asking them for the following year's budget. and they don't really have their feet on the ground too closely. So they really ask for as many months as they can get to just get a feel for how this year's budget is actually working for them so that they can build next year's budget accurately. And so they need time. We give them as much as we can, but in the end, the warrant has to close on January 1st generally, so that is what it is. So let's talk about what amounts to our, this is, what I would like to do with this is have, we're not gonna spend a lot of time on this tonight because the format of this right now is not that helpful to our membership. We need a little more data to be able to more accurately understand who's gonna do what and who can do what. Just so we're all aware, the commitment we make to just be at these meetings once a month and then very frequently during the fall is augmented by a requirement that we all observe some other aspect that affects the financial well-being of the town, whether that's the Board of Assessors or the Personnel Board or some of these other boards. They don't meet that frequently, maybe some of them, most of them meet once a month, but there are some which meet every 2 weeks. The Select Board meets every 2 weeks, the School Committee meets every 2 weeks. So there is some commitment required there to attend these other meetings. So we each have to take some observational role and commit to showing up at their meetings and then reporting back to the larger FinCom what you heard, what the issues are on the table. We heard a lot of good feedback last year regarding how are we going to fund affordable housing. That was a very important committee last year, especially as we approached town meeting. What were they thinking about how to tax the residents to get the needed funds to create affordable housing? So that was a big deal last year. But every year there will be some, new reason to be somewhere. Some of these committees have very little financial impact on the town. We no longer observe the Natural Resources Committee. I don't believe we have been observing the Board of Health for a few years. So this is, we'll pick and choose here. The library may be a big deal this year because they're looking to build an entirely new wing, and even though the Library Corporation is a private entity, there is some level of observation that would be helpful overseeing the library. So we have a number of assignments, but what I'd like to do here is just push this off till our next meeting. But we need to know what day of the week these meet, and if you can't do it on that day, obviously that's not something you can do. And I will send around a list with an improved, like these happen on Wednesdays once a month, or the third Wednesday of the month, and this happens at Cemetery Committee here, whatever. We will not probably be observing the Cemetery Committee, another one we do not observe. So we need to get names plugged in because we need to observe each of these committees that make a financial difference to the town's well-being. Now, while we're on this, just to get my 2 cents in as the new chair. One of the components of our Finance Committee report, there are only 3 things we really do as a Finance Committee. We generate a Finance Committee report, we create guidelines for the major budgeting entities, and we create a 5-year tax projection. Those are the 3 things we are supposed to be doing that we've been told that we need to be doing, and it's in writing. We are working through a sustainability component, and I think in the next meeting or 2, we will sidle up to that and publish something regarding a sustainable growth rate, because we've been working for 2 years on a concept called the sustainable growth rate, so we need to work on something and get it out.
We need to get it out really before we start the guidelines.
That's right. I believe we should be getting it
But I
out
think we
like
have to
in the summer. In our summer meeting, we'll get it out. We'll publish our letters to the to the budgeting entities, and at the same time, that when those letters go out, I'd like to see a number in those letters saying, here's the sustainable growth rate we're looking for the next N number of years.
Are we, can I ask, so when you say get it out, you mean publish something in what, the Concord Journal? What are your thoughts?
Well,
What is, the public hearing is where I was going.
I'm not, can we defer that for a minute, Mary? We can get back to it. We're sort of
Okay.
working on these observer reports.
Go ahead.
And the only thing that I got diverted, but the point I was trying to make is that one of our major commitments is to create a finance committee report that gets handed out to town. Everyone in town gets it by mail, and it's a component that helps people, it advises people for town meeting. In that report are observer paragraphs that each observer produces from their year of watching that particular committee. What are the major issues? What's going on in this committee? And that's a component of that report. Those paragraphs can easily be done by the time the warrant closes. We don't have to spend, we can put them all together in draft form, and they can be on the shelf and waiting. And if we need to edit them between when the warrant closes and when we go to press, we can make small edits. But I just am trying to help Carrie LaFleur. She got really frantic at the end of trying to pull together the Finance Committee report with paragraphs outstanding and edits needing to be done. And it's a very busy time, and anything we can do to help Carrie pull that report together quickly and easily will be very helpful. So I will circulate a better list that has dates on which these meet. And if anybody has a committee that they would just love to observe, I'll pass this around, and you don't have to put anything down. We're not gonna make you, but I'll pass mine around, and if you'd love to observe something, just write your name in. I think this is an interesting thing. I'd love to be involved in this. I put an X next to the ones I don't.
Right.
Process.
Yes.
Generally, what we've done is, like, this has been passed through email to
Yep.
everybody, and then we send back our
1, 2, and 3. Or whatever.
to Kerry.
That's fine. Let's do it that way.
Yeah.
We'll send it out, and you can give us your 1, 2, and 3.
By the next meeting.
By the next meeting, we'll have it sorted out. We'll get an improved thing that'll show what day they meet on, what their frequency is, and what day they typically meet. So if it just is a complete non-starter for you, you'll understand right away. Okay, so we'll send it through email. You give us your 1, 2, 3, and we will come up with it by the next meeting. We'll go around. It's administrative. Okay.
Dean?
Thank you. Yes.
Dean, before you move on, I just have two quick comments. First of all, I don't know if all of these committees are something that are required by regulation or something, but just in case, I would move that we delegate to Dean whichever committee should be observed and not have to worry about having to fill all these. The second thing is, I think we should add the new school building committee, which I think has been formed, or if it has been formed, it's going to be formed. And that should be observed if they'll let us. I don't know, sometimes they don't.
Well, that'd be.
Phil, do you mean
I
the
think
middle
that's
school
sort of on the
building?
list.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, it's middle school building.
I think it's here, isn't
It's
that the
here.
middle school facility study?
Well, it has a study, but now it's it's really a
So it's
building committee.
it's not worded correctly.
Oh, I
here.
see, I see.
It's on here, it's just not
change
worded.
that to middle school
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes, that,
Yeah, again, usually the chair kind of goes through and winnows the list and adds relevant things.
Yeah, I think if it's required by some regulation that we don't know about. Okay, all right, fine. Then-
No, the goal here is to really have us observing things which are have a financial impact on the town, so.
So we would defer to you on that, Dean, to pick which ones they are.
All right, thank you. You'll be observing the Natural Resources Committee. So there are our committee observers. Correspondence, I'm not aware of any correspondence. So we have no correspondence this week. So chair's report, that's me. So I have a few comments. In the previous year, something came to my attention which I'm working through with the moderator and with the IT department of the town. and that is that we had a few requests come in which were on the edge of being what I would call a FOIA request, asking us for underlying materials that we may have used in our deliberative activities. Most of them were not, we didn't have to respond to because they were not in our purview, or there were reasons that it didn't mean anything. However, it did point out something, which is that for the purposes of this committee work, we are all pretty much using personal email accounts. Anything that may involve a communication that could be purely administrative. Carrie sending us, here's the packet for this week, has to go to some account, and it goes to your personal or possibly business email account. If someone wants to make a FOIA request, where do they go, and how does the town actually service that request? It's very complicated, especially when everybody's operating on their own account. So I brought that to the attention of the moderator, who's in charge of our committee, and said, is it possible for us to be each assigned a concordma.gov email address so that our activities that are related to this committee, we can communicate using official accounts that can be monitored if necessary? And the answer coming back was sort of, not quite. There were two proposals made by the IT director. One of them was, how about a distribution list, fincom@concordma.gov, so anybody sending anything to the FinCom, it would then be sent out to your emails, but they could then find that anything that got sent to that could be found by somebody searching. That's one solution. That doesn't really capture anything where we may have an interchange of emails amongst ourselves, but it's a start. The other alternative was to assign email accounts to chair and vice chair, that vice chair being the guidelines chair, and members of the community should communicate with one of those two people, and they would then distribute things out. It's another alternative. We haven't sorted this out yet. I still think everyone should have a concordma.gov email address, just to make it easier. Would anybody have any comments about it? Would that be complicated? Would it be, I spoke to John the other night. He says he's already got 5 email accounts for different reasons.
Yeah. Well, I think, some smart people did that. They had their FinCom.
I do that, yep. I just went to Gmail and created another account in Gmail that's dbanfield.fincom@gmail. It's free, you can do it. It's not a problem. We could all decide to do that as a workaround. There may be,
You're the only one.
I'm the only one.
So it'd be nice, because then everybody wouldn't have to look at emails. They know what your email's gonna be for FinCom.
Right, it's just right. So, yeah, exactly. So I did that, and it's not a complicated,
So how does that solve the problem of actually trying to find the emails? It just,
well, what it would allow for is the administration of the town would have a place that they have access to, that they could search if someone said, I'm looking for you to cough up all the communications on this topic, because it's really important to me. The town has a lot of very interested citizens, and these things happen. They happen more frequently at the schools or maybe the town itself, but it's just something that had, we were on the edge of it last year, and it would give the town the ability to do it, whereas the alternative is they have to ask us, what do you have in your email box, Dean? Yeah, that's really not bad.
But it wouldn't necessarily, at the extreme end,
Brian,
you're saying.
you've got to use a microphone, otherwise.
Yeah.
At the extreme end of what you're saying or suggesting is that if a FOIA request were actually to come through legal means, we are exposed. Our entire Gmail account is exposed. So
No.
Is that?
No, you can't ask them for all of your Gmails just because you used your Gmail for official business.
It's your income coming from your Gmail to a mass.concord.gov that is searchable, not your Gmail.
No, they wouldn't
Sent to Carrie, for example.
No, I think what Brian's question is, if somebody was making a FOIA request and we were operating the way we are today, somehow his entire archive of all of his communications would have to be sifted through to find the ones that are relevant,
And
Yes,
to
but-
ensure,
No.
that it's comprehensive.
That's not how it's done. It's done in litigation all the time.
Okay,
So you have custodians, but the custodian would be Carrie, and she would gather emails, and then she might ask you for your emails that with certain search criteria, but she wouldn't get you access to your mailbox.
Okay.
So you would turn over, it's possible some things could turn up because you had keywords in your emails, but you'd be able to sift through that before it gets disclosed.
so but I think to your point, I think to just set up a new Gmail account is probably the easiest thing to do. So
right now it's the easiest thing for each of us to do is to establish a Gmail account with something like first initial, last name, .fincom, and then we have a place where everything that we communicate about resides, and it's outside the government. It doesn't involve getting the IT department to give us stuff, and it would be helpful.
I think that
Dean, I
there's,
just gotta tell you, so I actually would counsel against this.
Okay, okay,
Because we do this all the time, and people have multiple emails, like John, I have emails that I do check, but like twice a year.
right.
But I get lots of emails on. And I tell people don't use that email. I have a Suffolk University, I'm technically a professor at Suffolk. I never check the email. I tell students and other faculty, and all the other faculty say the same thing. They never check their emails. But my experience in legal discovery is that nobody's satisfied with just getting your Concord.gmail, ConcordFincom. Gmail account. They say, I want you to search your personal account too, because we all do it, right? I'm gonna get an email from Tom or Carl or you, and I'm just gonna respond to it, inadvertently or not, on my personal account. So you're never gonna be able to get the thorough search. And I just think there could be people who won't check them. That would be the problem.
I think there's also another thing you have to be really careful about, which is open meetings law and the violation of that.
That's right.
And it would be, all of our discussion should be at a meeting and not interspersed in emails. And so if there is a request that comes in, it should be directed either to the chair or to the vice chair or Carrie, however you want to do it. But that should be one contact person, and actually Carrie then should distribute whatever the question is, whatever the comment is, out to the entire committee that comes out as correspondence, or just before the meeting as correspondence that we look at and that we discuss at that time. So there should never be any request that has to go to my email or your email or anybody else's email. Everything should be on record that we discuss, and that's the cleanest way of doing it. Even at the subcommittee level, it becomes a little trickier, but not really.
No.
Because if the subcommittee is holding a meeting and they announce they're holding a meeting, that's one thing. So just to eliminate the possibility of somebody thinking that we're violating it because we have email communications going on, I think we should just steer clear of that.
Fair enough. As I said, this is the closest we've gotten to a FOIA request for this particular committee, and it didn't really amount to much, but it was, I asked about how we could guard band that and make the committee a little more carefully challenged. But you're absolutely right, Dee. The only things that are permissible on a broadcast basis through email are purely administrative things, setting up meeting times, establishing agendas, very administrative activities, but nothing really beyond that.
I get one other suggestion, that is, good email procedure is for you to set up files that automatically sort emails into subcategories. You can do that on Outlook for your principal email. So you could have things like that something that comes from concordmad.gov all go into the FinCom file on your own FinCom file. Right. And that would be a good way to have that segregated and ready to go. But I think that people should set those up on their own.
Right. You know, it's very rare that we even see anything that, we have gotten, you know, close, and some people have had to be gently nudged, like you're on the verge of violating open meeting law. So people are very aware not to do this. So new members, just be clear. A communication among all the members outside the context of an open meeting is a violation of our deliberative process. It's a state law violation. You can't do it. So
Dean, so right now, the email address on the Finance Committee website goes to finance@Concord.
I believe that goes to Carrie. I could be wrong. Finance@ConcordMA.gov goes to Carrie. It doesn't go anywhere else.
Right, I'm assuming that all public comments and questions get directed to that. Email address.
It should.
Yeah, they should.
And if they come directly to a member, then refer them to that email address.
Yes.
People may send you something, but you should then send it to Carrie. Say, this friend of mine sent me this. They know I'm on the FinCom. They have this question. Boom, and then it goes to Carrie. Then we can all get it as correspondence. But we can't communicate or deliberate on it until we get to a meeting and we're all together. Should be simple. Okay, so that's my first chair's report thing. We will probably defer and not really engage with that. Okay, I've already spoken about remote participation, and we voted to use it, so I'm good with that. I'm going to ask Tom to give us his last update from the chair's breakfast, if he has any notes there.
Well, I have a few. Excuse me. There was nothing of a substantive financial nature discussed, but there were a lot of interesting things, as there always are. Perhaps the most interesting report and subsequent conversation came from the report of the new chair of the Board of Health. And the Board of Health, among its many other activities, is very intensely looking at issues relating to nicotine, and both through combustibles and vaped products. And it is looking very carefully at the possibility of confining the sale of all nicotine-related products to one or two 21-plus stores that would not allow anyone in their doors who is not at least 21 years of age, and would handle all sales of all vaped and combustible nicotine products. This is something that they feel very strongly about. There will obviously be challenges in terms of legal. There will likely be challenges from the tobacco companies and the vaping companies, but other communities have done it, and they feel that it is such a serious public health concern that they really have to go forward with it.
On that point, actually, there is legislation at the federal level that might raise the purchasing age to 21. And Philip Morris took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal saying they support this. So it's interesting, you know, there's a good market for the Juul and the vapes and everything, but at 21 or 18, but they're in support of raising the legal age to 21. So it's possible that that may happen, and I don't know how that would impact, if it would impact at all, what the Board of Health is looking at.
Right. The chair of the Board of Health said that on a national level, there will likely be legal challenges from the national companies. However, it's quite likely that stores in town that now make a good deal of money selling nicotine products would push back on such a regulation also. So they anticipate a pretty hefty and robust discussion on this.
So Tom, short of this fairly draconian 21-only establishments, was there any discussion of restricting vaping products to non flavored versions or things that were not as attractive to youthful consumers. Is there any discussion of?
Yeah, there was a discussion of that, and as I recollect, she stated that current regulations in Concord forbid the sale of any flavored tobaccos or vaping products, with the exception of menthol, which happens to be the most popular so-called flavor among those products. So that is a loophole that they're very concerned about, and they're discussing doing something about that.
What, if any, are the financial implications of this? Are there any?
Reduce tax revenue.
Is that it?
Your company's gonna be, it's not, we don't get sales tax anyways, right?
No.
So it's only gonna be like the business, we'll have less business selling these things, so maybe.
Well, what about the legal side?
That's my question, because, what's going to be, have they considered the legal ramification of this and the cost of legal counsel that the town would incur to fight this, especially if we have tobacco coming in and supporting businesses that are going to need the help to push back, which means there's going to be a big legal battle, and do we really want to put up the money to do that? So this would have a direct impact on, we would have to consider that as, a very emblematic but different topic, Estabrook Woods, they had to come back and we had to go through the process of really trying to determine, do we want to allocate more money to that fight?
Right. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, that is definitely a big financial consideration. Let's see. I think really that was about the most significant matter that came up that morning. Matt Johnson, who was representing the planning board, was talking a good deal about their ongoing efforts to liberalize the permitting of accessory units, which will have a big impact on keeping people here in the town. These accessory units would be both aimed at family members and non-family members. Really, I think that's about all I want to regale you with.
So I don't have any further notes in my initial chair's report, and I think we can move on to observer reports from those who have been observing in our interregnum between town meeting. So, Mary?
Yeah, sure, I'll start. I went to the school committee meeting, and three things are noteworthy. The first is that they've established a revolving fund to collect private donations to help subsidize high school trips. Am I right? So far they've just developed this mechanism to collect the money. They have not addressed how they're going to disperse the money. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the Carlisle representative to the board of the school committee asked if we could resurrect I guess we used to sit down and talk with Carlisle during the guideline development process. And he suggested, you were there too, John, right? He suggested that we do that again this year, before we finalize guidelines, that we talk with the Carlisle Finance Committee. So I was wondering if that was something that we would entertain doing, going to Carlisle or having them here and
To their finance committee?
their finance committee. Actually, he talked about how, I guess, in the past we used to have joint meetings with the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. But since I'm not on the Board of Selectmen, I thought that I would ask if we could do that as a finance committee. So that was, John, do you want to add anything?
Well, my understanding was they were asking for some sort of observer status. I didn't know, what form that cooperation would take.
Well, in my experience, when I was in the Lincoln Finance Committee and we had a regional high school with Sudbury, we used to have one meeting where we would actually talk about the guidelines together. So I guess I assumed that's what he had in mind. So that I thought I'd just bring that up and see what we think.
It certainly it has merit because each town is confronted with slightly different things. Even though the budget for the school is consistent across both towns, the population of the students tends to hit individual towns differently. So it may have some merit because we'll each struggle with the way that the population shift will change each individual town's contribution. So it does have some merit.
So when we're putting together the guidelines calendar, maybe we'll build that in there, okay?
Yep.
And then the last thing I had to say is that I was a little bit jealous because the school committee spent time actually talking to and recognizing the members that were rolling off of the board. And they spent time, talking to them individually about what they had contributed. They were presented with a jacket, they were given hugs. And, and we didn't do that. I never got a chance to hug Scott or June and, Randall Curve, so I just thought that was funny, the difference between how the boards operate, so that was my only other observation.
Next Thursday night could be your chance.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I have no observers report.
Nor do I.
Nor do I.
Me neither.
Not me.
A bunch of no's over here. John?
Well, so I observed the select board meeting Monday night. It was canceled and rescheduled for now.
You observed that? Did you observe that from the Colonial Inn? That was a good one.
That's right.
Yeah, we observed that meeting from the Colonial Inn.
We did.
It was great.
That's good.
All right, so I do have an observer report from the select board meeting of 5/6. So there's a piece of property on Monument Street which was under agricultural restriction, and that means that the property owner was receiving tax breaks, property tax incentives for many years, but they are in the process now of selling that land, and because of the tax incentives that they received, the town of Concord has rights of first refusal. I don't know whether we would be interested in pursuing it. I wrote down 14A monument. I don't know what 14 is.
It's 68.
68. Let's see what is it. Okay, I don't know where it is. Do you know where it is, John? No,
Well, it's way down here someplace.
it's somewhere
It's
down.
supposed to
Where is the agricultural land? Way down here someplace. I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, there is a
Just carry
piece.
that? Carry, do you know?
It's landlocked, that's all.
It's landlocked.
It's land.
And they just voted to waive their right of first refusal.
Oh, right over there.
I know where
Okay.
it is, I think.
Is
It's,
it Windmill Court?
Oh,
it's at the back of the cemetery. There's some land back there at the back end of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery.
61.
I'm just guessing, but that's landlocked land back there.
Okay. Well, anyway, so apparently the meeting in the other room over there has just waived our right. We were reminded that every 2 years, each of us has to recertify on conflict of interest rules governing committee membership and it's really we are municipal employees, and we need to recertify every 2 years. There's a website which takes you through the conflict of interest rules, and we need to recertify every 2 years. And then there was a review of the long-range plan and how it would dovetail with the select board's goals for the year. And I made a note that Mike Lawson, the chair, had sort of downgraded fiscal planning because he felt that the town and the FinCom are doing very well. So we don't have to really prioritize that. The four things that he had prioritized were capital planning, which has been high on our list, affordable housing, economic vitality, and transportation. So those are the four buckets that the chair was emphasizing in his sort of goals for the select board for the year. And fiscal planning, he felt, was being well managed by our committee.
The operating
and by the town itself. So that's my report on the select board meeting, and their meeting over here as a makeup from the other night, so we missed that. And so I think we now can move on to the director's report. Give that lady right, exactly.
Don't worry, I'm not gonna stay long.
We're gonna have photographs of the back of your head. It's gonna be great.
So, I wanted to let you know that in a couple of weeks, we will be selling $6,435,000 in bonds, $5.5 million for general fund capital projects, and $925,000 for enterprise fund projects. We did go through a rating review, and our AAA bond rating was upheld, but I did want to mention to you, because sometimes you ask me what might be a reason for a negative outlook, like the district received fairly recently. So Moody's did mention that a decline in reserves, a lack of voter support for operating or capital needs, or a material increase in the debt burden might be a reason for negative outlook on a AAA bond rating.
Was the lack of the community to vote some capital requirement, was that specific? Did it pertain to a specific vote that we took at town meeting?
No, those are
No,
just
no,
general.
General.
Those are the buckets that they look at.
Right, and I think we talked about this before, because I think somebody on the committee asked,
Yes.
you know, what about continually having debt exclusions? And I think I said they don't care as long as you approve them, but if you start not approving them, then they don't like that. So if the town were to receive a negative outlook, that is usually placed on the rating for 18 to 24 months. I don't think there's a strong possibility of that happening, and I don't think that should be a reason that the town doesn't move forward with needed capital improvements, because not maintaining your capital assets would be something that they would not like to see as well. When I mentioned that to the selectmen in their meeting, the question was what impact might it have on interest rates, and I think in this environment it's pretty negligible. But we certainly would do that analysis if that happened, but I really don't see that as an issue. So I have some documents relative to the rating review that I'm hoping to send out to you tomorrow, so you can see, we have a press release also that we will be issuing, that you can dig into that, and maybe we want to have a discussion about that at some point in time, because they do have metrics in the rating that may be of interest to you as well.
Carrie, do they have any metrics about reserves?
I didn't bring everything with me, but what they have provided us this year for the first time is a scorecard, and so for each of the different items that they look at, they tell us how we ranked. Were we a AAA in that? Were we a AA1? And that is something that we're seeing for the first time. And I think the reserves were AAA, but there were a number of items that we were AA1, but still overall AAA. So you may want to get into that. Our financial advisor would be happy to come to talk, and I know he hasn't been here to meet with you since I've been there, so at least for 3 years, so you may want to have a conversation and invite him, and I know he would be happy to.
So when they say reserves, they mean both free cash and stabilization funds?
Yes.
So if we were to move some free cash coming up from the next town meeting into a stabilization fund, that wouldn't impact?
They don't.
Great.
They don't.
Just to be clear, good.
So as a coming, when is the timing for the review? Moody's review, when is that?
So it happens annually.
Right.
And we borrow every year, so it's in advance of our borrowing.
So it's in advance of the issue, bond issue that's coming up.
We're typically doing that in May.
Okay.
Could you also forward a proxy statement, or a proxy statement that comes with the bond issuance?
Yes.
Can you forward that?
Yeah. I can send that, so hopefully that'll get out tomorrow, if not early next week.
What's the timing for the actual issuance? Do you know?
It's weeks. We have, I can't remember if I'm going back to the select board, June 3rd or the 17th, I think it's the 17th, so it's sometime in the first.
Time is really is.
Yes, that's what I think.
So Carrie, did they look at our warrant article? How do you know where each one, you said that there are 3 categories there that they look at. Do you put them in certain categories from the warrant article in terms of what the town approves and doesn't approve? How does that work? How do we know where each warrant article, if it has a monetary component to it, how do we know where it fits?
Well, they would look at the financial statements, I presume. I don't think they're looking at the warrant article.
No.
Well, so when you were talking about the 3 categories
Yeah.
where we might slip, how can I reconcile where it might be? Where do I look to see how we're doing in each of those categories?
So in terms of reserves, the audited financial statements would be the best place to look. The issue, you know, with the voters not approving a debt exclusion, you know, that's a valid question. And then what was the third one? I really have to go back and look. An increase in the debt burden. So that would be tied to, you know, documents that we put together for the audited financial statements that show the amount of debt that we have at any point in time.
So is there an increase in debt burden? I mean, is there some amount of increase that would be of alarm, or obviously not a little?
I think there is, and that would be a good thing to get into with the financial advisor, where he would be able to talk to you about specifics.
I think we should schedule that meeting.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't know, the other thing I wanted to mention is at your June meeting, I'll present to you any budget transfers that I would like you to consider, reserve fund transfers. Other than that, that may be a light agenda, so that may be an opportunity to bring him in before we start the budget process all over again.
Would that same individual cover the district?
The district has a different financial advisor. Yes, we use same bond council, different financial advisor. He certainly is aware of their credit rating, though.
And they're still on credit watch negative, I think.
Yes. And as they've talked about, that really has to do with their reserve level. Yeah, the excess and deficiency, which
They made some headway.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
We come to our portion of our meeting where we look for citizen comments. Any comments from the public?
Surely Sandy has a comment. You must have a comment. You're here.
Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, can I, remember we talked about sustainability and what were some of our thoughts about as an article in the journal or a hearing, and we tabled that because you wanted to get back on. Can we talk about that?
We can come back to that if you'd like.
Thank you.
It's been a policy initiative of the Finance Committee for the last 1.5 to 2 years to try and establish a forward-looking, sustainable growth rate. And we voted a metric what I intended to do, Mary, was to assemble a packet that had a copy of the Randall curve with pertinent lines on it, the votes that we've taken to establish a metric, and just to sort of level set, but it's not on tonight's agenda. But I'd like to get I think we generally, by the end of July, send letters to the various operating entities.
to the guidelines.
And with that letter, we should move forward with a sustainable growth rate that's included in the letter, saying this is what we are looking for. This is what we are hoping for. So we have 2 meetings at least to get to that, and I don't have any prepared remarks or any prepared initiative for tonight. Would you like to discuss the sustainable growth rate?
Well, I'd like us to start thinking about having a hearing, and the last time we had a hearing, it was well attended. Unfortunately, I think we had it in February. Is that right, Tom? We had it in February, which was after the guidelines had been published, and it turned into a conversation about that year's operating budget relative to the budgeting entities.
And that's why it was well attended. The people that turned up were solicited to turn up to tell the finance committee to expand the school budget. So they weren't there to talk about this.
There were some people there. There were some people there
There were
that
some,
were
yes.
truly interested in a sustainable growth rate. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is I'd like us to think about having a hearing, and I'd like the optimal timing would be before we're in the hurly-burly of this year's budget, because otherwise it just turns into what it always turns into.
Before we send it out, I mean, we will probably basically confirm what the rate for that year is.
Absolutely, yeah, we would have to have a rate before we have the hearing, yes.
Yeah.
But I think, I'd just like to throw it out and find out if people are interested in that, if that's an idea that has any legs or not.
I think it's a good idea to have a hearing. I think Dean's idea to include it in the letter is a good idea.
Yep.
And sometime soon after that, or soon around the same time, we should try to get it more widely publicized with an article or a letter to the journal, so people will start talking, whatever the number is, and start thinking about sustainability.
The real issue we have with timing is that we want to get these letters into the hands of the budgeting entities with as much lead time as possible, because the fall is a busy time for everyone, and it's pedal to the metal for this committee. So we tend to get those out by the end of July.
Right.
And that is the absolute middle of the summer when people's attention is to the mountains or the beach. And it is hard, that's all.
Right, how about first thing in the fall?
Or how about having a hearing at next month's meeting, which is June 27th? It's a light agenda. We have enough time to get the word out. I don't think it'll be well attended because Mary, to be honest, I don't think many people were there for talk about sustainable growth.
Really?
But at least we will have at the other one, and but at least we'll have the public will have a chance to comment on it, and we have a month to get the word out of what it is.
Can I ask a question? Is there background material that the FinCom published last year around this growth rate, et cetera, that at least we members can look at, or is there a piece of paper for the public to react to, for them to show up and do a public hearing?
There was a subcommittee, and it issued a very brief report or statement. Tom, have I got that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So that should be available. We can make that available. And we took subsequent votes with the whole finance committee regarding how would we construct such a rate? What input elements or metrics would we use to construct such a rate? So we did take a vote on how to do that. And we can dig up the motion from the minutes, and so you see where we ended up with that. So I guess the question I have regarding a public hearing is, what do we expect to learn from it? That's what I want to know. That's what what do we expect as a finance committee to learn from it? This is an educational outreach effort on our part to establish something that we are trying to provide some level of guidance with. I'm not clear on how that role that we're trying to establish for ourselves changes by having an annual hearing.
this is what I had in mind, and when I think of the hearing, it's not just for us to publish a number. It really is for us to communicate to the public some of the things that we're looking at that concern us, such as the Randall curve, such as the fact that we've got a mountain of debt that we're facing with the middle school, and the fact that we've got some OPEB liabilities that we're not fully funded. These are things that I would like to communicate and then listen to people to find out, is this something that concerns them or not? And so it's more of an outreach and listening session as opposed to a, here's the number that we've researched, that we've published, and we're going to try to hold ourselves to this number when we publish a guideline. So it's more communication, and I hate to use the word marketing, but it's more community outreach. That's what I had in mind.
So the State Health Policy Commission has a process like this.
Could you use a microphone, please?
So the State Health Policy Commission, which is actually charged with trying to control the rate of growth in Massachusetts health expenditures, actually has a process similar to this. So they set a target rate for a growth rate for healthcare for the next year. But then they invite comment from the public, including hospitals, health plans, and others, to provide input into should we adjust the number up or down. And based on that input, they'll then go back and either stand firm or revise it up or down. I think that's what you're trying to do. It's a good one because it gets all the stakeholders involved in feeling like they had a sense of input into the number. And so if that's something that you're trying to do, I can get some information for us to look at to see kind of what the process looks like. But they are trying to educate folks too through that process.
I am trying to start a conversation, that's for sure.
Yeah.
As far as having input into the number, I'm not sure of that.
But again, it comes back to the deeds, right? Ultimately, then, what are you trying to do?
We don't really want you.
Remember, we're on TV right now.
Well, wait, there's a lot of different numbers, okay? So we,
I do think we could benefit from public input on the number, and it's like the comments that we're gonna get from the stakeholders. Maybe we came up with a number for the new members. It was the average of the CPI and the 10-year Treasury bond. We came up with that after a lot of debate, and we thought that's a good number as a target. But somebody might in the audience come and say, no, you shouldn't, for a municipal entity, you shouldn't be using the CPI or a 10-year Treasury bond. You should be using some other number, whatever that might be. It might be the rate of inflation of Tom Brady's salary or something like that. But the point is that maybe they come up with something that we hadn't considered before we set the rate.
So a process that includes what we'll call a comment period and a feedback loop that tries to engage with the stakeholders. I think there could be multiple modes, let's call it that.
Okay.
There could be a way in which the feedback could be received through a website component of our finance committee page, or hey, we're going to do this, please provide feedback. There are a variety of ways. A single hearing is one way, and I'm not sure how much value we got out of the last one. I attended it. I don't know. I mean, we had a lot of people.
we started the conversation, and we remember it was really the impetus for having the warrant article, the article in this year's warrant that I know we ended up pulling because we felt we weren't ready because we didn't have a number. But I think we need to continue the conversation. I just know that when we go into town meeting, the people who want to spend money do a great job with community outreach as far as educating people, as far as what they're going to get and how this is going to benefit them. And we don't do a good job going out and on the other side saying, are you aware of how much this is going to cost you? Do you realize all these other financial constraints we're facing? And do you really want your property tax bill to go up by $1,000 next year? So there has to be some way that we can, outside of our guidelines, outside of the one hearing, I guess we have 2 hearings, some more proactive outreach to engage the community as we're being out marketed.
But Can we talk about that?
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
So, you know,
Brian, could you grab a microphone?
so as we went through the process of town meeting the last session,
Yep.
you know, one of the things I think one of our mandates as a finance committee is to advise the select
right.
board, is that correct?
It's really to advise town meeting.
Advise
which is-
town meeting,
yeah.
but strong, the constituency
Yes.
that's sort of representative of the town is the select board.
Yep.
So when we were going through this process at the last town meeting, what I was noticing is that there were several, you know, articles that
Yeah.
were,
Disconnect.
there was a disconnect between what we thought and what the select board
Yes.
thought. And, you know,
Yes.
as a primary sort of target audience, the marketing we should be doing, or at least thinking about, is how can we collaborate more or align ourselves with the select
Yep.
board as
If we wanna
opposed
do
to
that,
going
or
out and
you want
trying
the
to
other
do
way
a
around?
marketing pitch to the entire town. I mean, because I don't know how effective that is going to be.
Okay, that's a great, okay.
And so maybe we re-underwrite how effective we are working with the select board and really having them understand what it is we're trying to do. Because I think that they have a much broader audience than we do.
Yep.
And if that's actually the case, then we should be tapping in and leveraging that. I just don't think us doing a road show around town is going to be well received.
Really?
The time, just based on our schedule and the expectation around when people are actually going to be in town. I mean, what you were basically echoing resonates with me. You know, when kids get on vacation, it's a go time, and it's a lot of, you know, people are trying to just go places and get things done. It just becomes.
So let me just push back on that. I love your idea about getting aligned closely with the Board of Selectmen. I think that's pivotal. It really is. But as far as the roadshow, I think there are groups that would listen to us and welcome a conversation with us. And it would be something like the Council on Aging, maybe the League of Women Voters, maybe Concord Can, I don't know. And the timing maybe would have to be at the beginning of the school year. I don't,
No, and I think that's fair.
you know? And not everybody's gonna show up, and, you know, I'm not saying everybody's gonna say next year, whatever.
Can I just interject? I like what Brian is saying, but in a little different way.
Yeah.
How would you define our stakeholders?
The people who live in Concord.
Are
Property
they,
tax
or
pay-
are they
property taxpayers.
departments? You know, you were talking about OPEB, and I'm wondering, who is that really?
I'm thinking of property tax payers.
You're thinking property taxpayer, okay, what's gonna hit them, and that's a stakeholder, okay.
Right, that's-
Well, what about the departments? You know, if we're looking at the town and what's coming up with the town, that's one thing. What's coming up with the schools is another. And you might be, you know, Council on Aging, you might have different stakeholders who, if you got them together, just as Brian is saying with the Board of Selectmen, trying to get on the same page with them or have them understand.
I think the process we use now, where the departments, the spenders, come to us with their budgets every year.
But they come
That's-
separately. I'm talking, what if you had a meeting?
Through the town,
That's the town meeting.
So
Yeah,
we see
town
it all
manager.
together, yeah.
Yeah, it's-
And it's just the town manager,
No,
right?
and it's the school committee, but I agree with you, I think that process works pretty well as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the town manager works basically for the select board, so,
But he covers all the departments.
yeah, oh, and he's got total.
And then when we have the hearings, each department, you know, the enterprise funds to stand up. So there is a process, I think, now for us to have a conversation with the department.
You know, and the optics, I don't mean to get in the weeds here, but the optics of that town meeting last year were a little stark. I mean, you had the school committee and the select board sitting on one side, and then you had us sitting on the island on the other side. And then every time they wanted to come up with school committee proposed something, it was like, okay, we agree, select board agrees, and then it's like, okay, it's a finance committee? Oh, yeah. So,
We say no.
so, you know, and so I think we need to kind of just own how we can be more of an effective voice. Maybe there's some things we can possibly do to work more closely with the select board, just as a.
One thing I said, this is getting a little off the subject, but about the town meeting optics. I think the moderator should explain who the FinCom is at each town meeting so that people understand we're not these mean, stingy people. We are the financial advisors to the town meeting, so they're there to advise on responsible spending. Not, not the people that don't want you to have a new grade school or something like that.
But I know these ideas are good. It seems like you need a multi-factorial sort of strategy to approach this. And I think timing-wise, maybe over time we shift to a point where maybe in January, you're sort of announcing what the SGR might be for the next fiscal year. So you're sort of setting the stage a little bit earlier for the following fiscal year, right? And so you're giving people a sense a year and a half ahead of where you think the SGR should be. And so you're having those conversations over the next 6 months and people feel like they bought into the guidelines that are being set. Maybe that helps in addition to some of the optics of the town meeting, how we're presenting it in the annual report, et cetera. So it's probably a combination of these things over time we have to get.
It's a larger scope problem of how do we gain some traction with a bully pulpit at all? It's just
If I can answer that?
Sure, absolutely.
It might make sense to try to tie it into the long-range plan. So if
Really?
we have a
Like a
sustainability
five-year
goal, right, it's not the what, it's the why. So we have to be able to clearly articulate why that's our number, right? How we use the indexes that we use, but the issues outlined in the long-range plan are really about, if you look at the demographics of Concord, people want to age in this community, age in their homes, and we're losing that affordability as property taxes continue to go up. People can't afford to stay in town. We need to make it clear why we set these numbers and why we use the indexes we have. If we tie it back to the long-range plan, then I think it speaks to our constituents, which are the taxpayers, and ultimately, we provide guidance and direction for the town. There has to be a clear rationale, and those are the people that come to town. Those are the people we want to come to town meeting, right? They have a financial stake in the town. We all do. We want everybody there.
Yes.
It's the why. It's just this is our number. It's an empty number.
But I think to be fair to the finance committee,
Microphone.
oh, I'm sorry. To be fair to the finance committee, before I think I was here, there was a sort of a recycling conversation around how we can go through this process, and there was always an attempt to try to tie things back to sort of a rational explanation for the town. But then we end up at town meeting, present that, and if school committee or town decides that they just want what they want, they lobby the troops, even if it's against their core interests from a tax base. It's like, well, are we going to help property taxes? Are we going to help people, older, elderly folks, stay in town by keeping property taxes low, or do I want to do it? Is my kid going to get a brand new school? What's the priority? And I'm not saying these are easy answers. There's an easy answer here. I'm just suggesting that people aren't always necessarily voting. The evidence people may not listen to the evidence presented to them.
So, Dean, you're going to be sending out, or somebody's
I'm going to try to assemble a packet of historical work.
deliberations that we've had.
Deliberations we've had.
The whys are,
Yep.
we have talked about the whys a lot. We can
Right.
modify, there may be some critique and so on, but we've got a lot of thought.
And then maybe
And a lot of talk.
To return to
Lots of
Mary's
talk.
main question,
Yeah.
I think we should consider what channels of what kinds of feedback loops we want to establish. Do we want a hearing? A single big meeting where people get to come up to the microphone and give us their 2 cents? Do we want some sort of thing like the federal government runs, where there's a comment period and we are accepting feedback?
Yeah, survey.
or something.
Yeah, a survey monkey or whatever, however we want. I mean, there's a number of ways we could collect or bring in the kind of information that I think people may be willing or interested in sharing with us. You know, I'll just say this. I just feel as though we did a good thing to have that public hearing, but I just didn't. The feedback we got did not seem completely on point with what a long-range, you know, sustainable rate is. It was more of a how's it going to affect me tomorrow.
Exactly, that's what happened, but I think we can avoid that.
You think we can avoid?
I hope, well, I'd like to try.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So, do we want to consider anything this evening where we take an action, where we set something in motion, or should we just table it for now?
I'd really like to see the background information
Okay.
that you have.
All right.
And then to try to better understand, are we looking at like just 1 year? Are we looking at the sustainable approach that's over a 5-year period of time? You know, because it really, if you're talking about having a meeting with the town manager to discuss what his budget is, having a meeting with the school to talk about theirs, what we're doing is a one-on-one, which then they have the opportunity to gather their folks and you know, override what we want to do. But if you get all of those vested interests together, to understand we're all in this together, it's not one against another, and have them kind of sit down and really understand, you know, this takes a lot of work, but to have them to try to understand, and they are the decision makers in terms of when they're going to put forward, when they're going to have a new building, or how it's going to all relate together, because we're still working in silos when you're talking about the interaction of the FinCom and the school committee, or the FinCom and the town manager. It should be the town manager also having to deal with the school committee, having to deal with the enterprise funds, et cetera, all of those.
Well,
I think that's a challenge, Dee. I just don't know.
It is a
Their interests are not aligned. They have their own constituencies, and those constituencies have their own interests, and it's hard for them to look outside of their box, so to speak. It's just a challenge. So our interest in this was to provide some guideposts for those entities that would give them just a basic understanding of here's what we feel from our global perspective is manageable in a sustainable way going forward. And we'd like you to just use that as a tool for building long-term, like in particular, multi-year contracts with, union negotiations, for example, because we're frequently back on our heels where one of these budgeting entities may come to us and say, well, this contract is locked in, and so therefore it is what it is, and that's 70% of our budget, so good luck, this is what it has to be. So we want to give them the capacity to be planful and give them some guidance. That's really the goal here.
So Dean, can I just say, this is all repeat.
Yes,
of
it is.
multiple discussions that we had, at least 3, maybe 5.
This was not really on the agenda either.
No, it wasn't.
Yes.
We're up.
And so I do think you have to get around the materials from before, so people can understand what's already been
let's do
gone
that.
over. But I do think you should include it on next month's agenda.
I do too.
So the public has a chance to understand. I don't think many people will care, but the public will at least know the discussions on the agenda.
I think that's good. So we'll send out an assembled package of materials, the report of the Sustainable Growth Rate Subcommittee, any motions we took, any kind of background that I can find, the copies of the Randall curve that may be updated with maybe different lines on it, just so we have a little assembled set of information that brings everybody to the same conversation, and we'll put it back on the agenda for next month.
The guest commentary from Tom wrote 2 years ago in the Concord Journal.
That would be helpful as well. Yep,
Right.
thank you. Yep.
And some of the other things we've done as far as the hearing and the warrant the article. So it's not just data driven about the number, but it's also about the activities that we've done, right? Right. Great.
So just one naive question. There's a tax model that the FinCom has, is that right?
We
Tax
have,
model?
we have a five-year projected tax model. A little reverse engineering to look back and see how well we did, not very accurate.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm just curious, do we have a 5-year spending model?
Yes.
Like, it's like
Yes.
the town
It's
it's included in that
Yes,
model.
because the taxes are driven by anticipated spending.
It has very, it's not,
Projected spending.
But
it has a
yeah,
bad track record as far as being
Fair
predictive.
enough.
it excludes capital projects, and that's
Right.
the,
Oh, it does.
it excludes capital projects.
Exactly. That's the big
Unless
point.
they've already
Unless they've been voted, so
Right.
that's why
And
you're
it
finding.
includes school
Exactly,
spending.
right. It's-
It includes school spending, includes operating budgets, and it includes what we'll call the unavoidable expenses of things like healthcare or things like that that are just sort of baked in the cake. But it does not anticipate large capital
Sure.
hits.
And is that the model that's used to estimate future spending? So for example, if the school committee says we're looking at a union contract.
No, this is just something that the FinCom does and the thing is done in order to draw some lines and give the town meeting a little bit of an anticipation of where we think things are going. When are we gonna hit levy limit, exposure, which is something that seems to be coming up on us, et cetera. So that's what that is.
We probably will be, I think there are a number of upgrades to that model that we've been discussing about, and that.
Like putting a sustainable line on there is one of them.
Yeah.
And possibly adding capital projects is another.
Yes.
Things.
So, Dean, one resource for all of us, including new members, might be the ClearGov website. Yes. As a reference point as to where we are now in time for the 3 entities that we're talking about.
Right.
And how we compare to our peer groups, our benchmark peer groups out there, other surrounding towns. So ClearGov.com is I think a good resource.
This is
It is.
this is a subscription service that the town subscribes to. We add our specific financial information into ClearGov. Other towns are represented in ClearGov. If they are not subscribers, then they have Department of Revenue, Massachusetts Department of Revenue data is in there, so we still are able to compare ourselves to other communities, but it's on a fairly baseline. Whatever gets reported to the DOR is what ends up showing up on the website. So,
Dean, I think it would be really useful to organize a ClearGov boot camp sometime, so that those of us who want to learn how to use it better, more effectively, this could be an extracurricular meeting.
John Harris.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely,
John
sure.
Hickling.
John Hickling is an
And
expert
John
at
Hickling
it,
knows
so.
it too.
I think you just come volunteer for
all right. Okay, well, we've got a few things to work on here. We're going to work on a sustainable package. We're going to see what we can put together to help us understand our subscription model, our ClearGov. Carrie, can you just answer a simple question? Do members have, any kind of better rights on the ClearGov system, or are they just looking like citizens when they come in?
Just citizens.
That's fine. Okay, fair enough. I don't know that there's anything better that we would need to see anyway, so.
Just put in ClearGov into Google.
It's good.
You'll get it.
Okay, I don't think there's anything else on the table. That was an extended set of citizen comments. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Okay. Second. Okay, all in favor, stand up. Thank you.
So yeah, this is the sustainable.